Now, the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission, or T&TEC, experienced a large power outage on Saturday, which caused several parts of Trinidad to be without power for approximately 2 to 3 hours in some instances. Here to tell us exactly what happened on Saturday is Manager of Corporate Communications at T&TEC, Ms. Anabelle Brasnell. Ms. Brasnell, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on Now.
Hi, good morning, Kimberly. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, based on the first release that was sent on Saturday, we were told that there was a fault on one of the systems, I believe, at one of the independent power producers. What exactly happened on Saturday?
So there was a disturbance. It was a mechanical issue that occurred at one of our independent power producers, which led our under frequency scheme to kick in. And essentially what that did is that it automatically started load shedding to protect the system. And so persons across Trinidad, Tobago was unaffected, persons across Trinidad would have seen an almost immediate loss of supply.
And which independent power producer did this occur at? Do you know?
This occurred at one of the plants located in Point Lisas.
In Point Lisas. Now, I read in the release that you mentioned something about load shedding. What exactly is load shedding, and how does that become involved in the entire process?
Essentially, load shedding it's an automatic process. So the way the system is designed and is that if a fault happens and a significant fault happens, in order to protect the machines and the integrity of the machines, the system automatically starts dropping supply so that persons lose supply to match what is available in the generation. So machines are generating electricity up to a certain amount, and once there's a problem and the demand is too much for the machine, it starts dropping so that they both can match, and that is what we refer to as load shedding, automatic load shedding.
Right. And the independent power producer in Point Lisas that you mentioned, is it that because there was a problem on that system, the other independent power producers had to ramp up their power as well?
No, they were able to solve the problem, which is why we were able to get back the supply in a short space of time.
Okay.
We started restoration just about just about 20 past 10, we started restoration. So the disturbance would have occurred at just around 9 a.m. And at about 20 past 10, we started restoration, and all customers will back up by approximately 11:30.
I think what we can fairly say, though, Ms. Brasnell, is that a lot of people were wondering, oh my gosh, is this something similar to what happened in February? So how is this similar or different to what would have happened earlier this year?
There was no similarity except that the under frequency scheme tripped. In February, it went island-wide, Trinidad, because of several other factors. But in terms of the cause and clearly in terms of the restoration time, completely different scenario.
Now, is there any way to stop these sorts of things from happening? Because electricity might go, you might experience power outage for, let's say, about 30 minutes. But in this instance, it was for, let's say, 2.5 to 3 hours in some cases. Is there any way to prevent this from happening? Like, was it a man-made issue, or was it really, really a system error?
So these are mechanical and electrical systems that we're working with, and you would appreciate that anything that is machinery, things go wrong occasionally. And we do have systems in place to monitor and to ensure that we do preventative work to minimize the chance of something happening. But the reality is that when you're working with mechanical and industrial equipment, things sometimes do go wrong. And our goal is that if anything goes wrong, that we have systems in place to ensure that we mitigate it and we restore the supply to customers as quickly as possible.
Now, as you mentioned, the supply to customers, can you remind us which customers were affected, which areas?
It was across Trinidad, actually. So east, west, north, and south were affected. If you wanted to get some specifics, we have places like San Francisco, Betham, Santa Cruz, Arima, Kumuto, St. Joseph, Toko, Tacarigua, Diego Martin, Westmoreland. The system will affect areas, pockets across the entire island.
Yeah. Now, as you mentioned, those pockets, because, for example, I was in St. James and there was electricity, but I know that I had friends who were in Diego Martin and they were not affected. So how is it that it affects one area, but it doesn't affect another area, which we can say is so close in proximity?
That is the way that the grid is designed. So we have feeders that are linked to each other. And the way the system is designed is that we can take off part and we can leave part on, which is why if we have, for instance, preventative maintenance work being done in anywhere in the country, you would have one small community being taken off and another not coming off. So it works in a similar way where we just take off, it automatically shuts from one location and not another.
And I'm hearing that an investigation will be done by the independent power producer. Do you see any sort of issues or concerns with this? Is there a reason why the T&TEC Commission is allowing the independent power producer to conduct the investigations and not have like an independent committee, let's say?
Well, the T&TEC doesn't manage the independent power producers. They are just that, independent power generators. And so they have to do an inquiry. I wouldn't say when you use the word investigation, you talk about a committee, it sounds like something very formal and something very serious. They're going to do an internal assessment to see what the root cause is, and we're going to get a report. If something needs to go further, then obviously it will go further. But an assessment and a report to T&TEC is what is going to happen.
Right. Now, I know in the nationwide outage that we had in February, some quarters were saying that it might be an issue of sabotage. Do we suspect any form of sabotage in this instance?
Well, the outage that happened in February was limited to Trinidad, so it was just island-wide to Trinidad. But as I indicated, so far what we've seen, it was a mechanical issue. There was no external intervention.
Right. And how is, I mean, Tobago is so blessed. How is Tobago never affected by these outages? Is that going back to what you were saying about the grid and how the grid system works?
So there is a power plant in Tobago, and Tobago is not necessarily hooked up to the under frequency scheme that would have kicked in on the weekend. So Tobago was just left out. I mean, unfortunately, we have had instances in the past where Tobago was affected alongside Trinidad, but we are very grateful that in the last two instances, they didn't experience any problems.
Right. Now, I know that you are related to T&TEC, Ms. Brasnell, but I still want to ask, do you know if any of the other utility services were affected? For example, did people get any problems with water? Did you hear any concerns about that?
I haven't been advised that by WASA that they had any issues. You have to remember that the supply only went between 9 to 11:30, so it wasn't a significantly long outage period.
Now, Ms. Brasnell, one of the things that a lot of people they are commending the commission for is that they had the constant updates coming in. So how often were the independent power producers, how often were they contacting you, and how were you able to get the word out so quickly?
Once something happens, we are in immediate contact with them, and we just, once we have information, we provide it to the customers, which is what we would have done. We sent out the initial update at 9:50 actually, indicating that something had happened, and we were monitoring it, and we just continue to provide updates based on the information that we have. And as I said, in this instance, they were able to almost very quickly start the restoration process. So we were able to just say to customers, restoration has started, and we expect that it will be finished by 11:30.
Nice. And I've been seeing on the Commission's Facebook page, is it that you have some scheduled services that's going to be rolled out this week? Can you speak some more to that?
On a daily basis, actually, we carry out preventative maintenance work across the country in all our distribution areas. The Commission is divided into 5 distribution areas: Tobago, North, South, Central, and East. And every day on our Facebook page, as well as on our website, you can see the list of areas that we're going to be doing preventative maintenance work there. So that is what you would be seeing on our Facebook page, the work that was pre-scheduled to become done this week.
Course. And in terms of the call centers, I know that one of the releases, or a lot of the releases would have been saying that there was an unusually high amount of calls that was coming in to the commission when the power outage occurred. Is it that the commission has ramped up the call center numbers to allow customers to call in when something like this happens?
So what happens when you have any incident, automatically the calls spike. It's just a normal part of the functioning of a call center because you have a large number of customers affected, and therefore you have much more people trying to get into the system at the time, and the lines could become overwhelmed. And so what we do is we just remind customers that the call volume is high, and so that you may expect delays. Depending on the situation, at times we would add additional lines. There wasn't any need for it on this weekend.
Of course. And Ms. Brasnell, finally, anything else you want to add before we close?
Just a reminder, we always take the opportunity to remind customers to be safe when they are operating around our infrastructure. I just want to use the opportunity. I know it's rainy season, but people will be planning for the later in the year when there's a lot of construction work or repairs happening at your home as people prepare for the various holidays that come up at the end of the year. Reminder that if you're working around the electricity lines, around our overhead lines, you need to check your clearances, stay a minimum of 15 feet away from our overhead lines. If you're using heavy equipment or machinery that has a boom, like a truck that has a dump truck, or you have like a backhoe or something that needs to come close to a line, people need to be aware of their clearances. If you're moving tall pieces of equipment and material, roofing beams, you're moving long ladders, you're moving like poles or flags or anything like that, being very close to the power line can endanger you. And it is something that if you're standing low and you're looking up, it's difficult to judge your perspective in terms of your distance away from the line. So we encourage people, you can either call for a temporary disconnection of the service so that you can work safely, or you need to have a spotter or somebody paying close attention to where you are coming to in terms of your distances. So be safe.
Okay. Ms. Brasnell, I'm just getting a request here. Is there a certain turnaround time if it is somebody calls the commission to remove wires, especially those hanging wires that may be a bit dangerous?
Could you clarify when you say hanging wires?
So sometimes there are power lines that needs to be isolated. Is there a specific turnaround time, like let's say for example 2 days or something like that, where the commission can come and well, after the request is made, I would say.
Okay, so low hanging wires, and I'm assuming you're talking about regular overhead lines that somebody might
the ones that hang down, yes, that can affect the vehicles and stuff like that, yes.
So low hanging wires is something that we treat as an emergency. So once the person contacts the call center, the 800 bulb or 800 T&TEC, that is something that we will investigate immediately or as soon as possible. In terms of the disconnection of your supply, if you have construction, that is a 24-hour period.
All right, Ms. Brasnell, well, as always, thank you so much for just letting us know exactly what happened on Saturday with that island-wide power outage. And of course, thank you so much for joining us again. It was a pleasure.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too,
and that was the Manager of Corporate Communications, Ms. Anabelle Brasnell from the T&TEC Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission, just sharing what happened on Saturday with that island-wide power outage. You're on the morning show. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. Stay with us.